And it's not too soon to start saving for one day. We call it retirement, but it could be your financial freedom day, right?
Welcome back to another episode of Voices of the Goddess, where brilliant women come to take a break from their successful and sometimes overwhelming lives to level up, live free, and create abundance.
If your hectic life has you feeling a bit lost, if you're building your career, brand, or business, or if you simply want to get the most out of life, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Julieta Wenzel, founder of Body and Soul PT and Soul Candy.
And I'm your co-host, Graciela Laurent, professional portrait photographer specializing in boudoir and personal branding.
Whether you're relaxing with a cup of coffee or running around town, we've got you.
Whatever you're doing, thanks for bringing us along and sharing a laugh.
Here comes the magic.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hi, sunshine. How you doing?
Feeling sunshiny.
Are you? You look sunshiny. I think my background is more sunshiny than I am, but that's
your background's very sunshiny and my hair is very sunshiny. Thank you to Eduardo.
Nice. So I had a crazy weekend, but one of the things that I saw, and I don't know if you've seen this yet, someone sent me an ad for a movie. I think it's called The Translators. I haven't watched it yet, but apparently it's about kids, like immigrant kids that translated for their parents. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I hope this
you can relate to that.
Right? Totally. Because, for anyone that doesn't know, I was born in this country, but my parents were born in Cuba, and then grandparents and whatnot from Spain and all that. So I spent a lot of my life just really translating for my mom. It's actually kind of cute because when I want to say like in college or something, maybe I was getting married and leaving, but I wasn't going to be there to write my mom's checks for her anymore. So I took a little piece of paper and I wrote down how to spell 100, 1,000, 1, 2, all the way to 20. Like I basically wrote down, this was before you could just hop on the internet and print it. Okay, this
right.
is cool. I wrote it down. Anyway, and I'm 49, so it's been, I can't do the math, X number of years since I left my house. And the other day, my mom pulls it out of her checkbook, like she still had my little
piece of paper. Oh my God!
Piece of paper from when I was like 17. So when somebody sent me this movie, I'm like, oh my God! Like I kind of like I want to watch it because I know I'm gonna relate, but I'm also kind of terrified to watch it because it's like a little bit traumatic. I don't know. I was always so envious of like all the American girls and, their parents that spoke English and had degrees and, could teach them the ways, no one ever helped me with my homework, no one could read it. Anyway, it was just really interesting.
I'm sure I'm definitely I definitely want to check that out. My great and maybe triple great on some side, like that's how far back my family, but they're all from Germany. And, my dad would tell stories when they were kids. A lot of German was spoken around the home for the elders, but the kids were not allowed to speak German and they could understand everything. But like if they ever spoke in German, they would get reprimanded. And so they stopped. But it's kind of sad to me because, they could have all been multilingual, but they're not because they weren't given that opportunity. And I'm going, well, I am bilingual, but German is not one of the languages I speak other than wie geht's, ich liebe dich. But probably if anybody's listening, they're like, oh my God, that's the worst German I ever heard. But
I think back in the day, right, when everybody was first, coming over, like you said, 3 generations ago, whatnot, the theme was assimilation, right? It was leave your culture behind and keep join the American culture, whatever that is, right? Which is really kind of ironic because what is American culture if not a combination of every other culture put together, right? So,
right. I think also back then, especially the German, because it was, just after World War II, and there was all of that stigma attached to.
Sure.
Anyway,
Well, very cool. So I'm hoping to watch the movie, but I think I need to watch it like with my siblings so that we can laugh where we need to laugh and cry if we need to cry.
Maybe. And if you can't get your siblings, I'll come hold your hand.
Aw, thank you, my friends. You see, this is why it works.
It does.
Speaking of working,
Should we bring on our guest?
yes, the hardest working financial advisor ever. I'm sorry, wealth advisor. Hi, Kat.
Hi, Graciela. Hi, Julieta. Great to be
Hello,
here.
welcome to the show. We're so happy you're here.
my
I know
pleasure.
Graciela knows you really well, but I only know you a little bit, and our audience doesn't know you at all. So please introduce yourself.
But like a juicy intro, the good one. Tell everybody.
All right. Well, my name is Catalina. I go by Kat. It's not my goddess name, but since we're in the voices of the goddess, why not? Let that be it.
But isn't it
I mean,
though?
there are a lot of cat goddesses, and that could be a topic of a whole show. So I won't go there right now. But Kat is definitely a goddess. It's a goddess name for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, make it juicy. Well, it's so great, Graciela, that you were talking about the show Translators because I jokingly tell my clients that I started my financial planning career when I was 8 years old. I came to this country with my mom and my two brothers, my older brothers. My mom was divorced. She left Colombia. So you could just imagine leaving Colombia 40 years ago, how far behind it was in women's rights. And she was a total rebel for getting divorced. So she came to the U.S. with her 3 children. And like your mom, Graciela, she didn't know how to write the checks. And so that was my job because you went to the ESOL classes, right? And the first thing they taught you was to write the numbers.
Wow.
so it was, hey, Kat, come over here and translate for me, write out these checks, answer the phone when the utility companies come because there was no press 2 for Espanol. It was like, come over here and you translate for us. And so that was my childhood. My brothers worked to help sustain the household, to supplement the income. And it was a pretty challenging time of our lives that really marked my desire for having more control over our money because money was controlling us, right? It limited some of our options. And so we had to really get on the ball when we came to the US. But I didn't start in financial planning, even though that was my experience as a child and growing up in my family. I started in fitness and wellness because I actually had my brother at one point became a professional cyclist. I had a professional soccer player in the family. And so we love sports. And I remember waking up every day and seeing my mom do her little calisthenics. And it was just very inspiring. I'm like, I love this. This just makes me happy. And, I decided that was going to be my life. But, as you know, in this life, we could live many lives, right? And so I did that for the first half of my life. I even started a business, running summer camps and so forth. But I ended up working at a university called Barry University right here in Miami. And, if you know anything about the university world, you must continue on to your PhD to show yourself worthy of your peers. And so I started a PhD in international sport and community development. And during that time, my husband, I had talked my husband into taking financial classes at the university because they were offered at no cost. And so he sat through the coursework, and I said, hey, at the very least, we could learn something, even if this is not something you're going to do. And so during the case study class where you do the analysis, one day he couldn't take notes. And I sat in the class with him and I said, okay, I'll take notes for you. And then we were doing all these analysis and I'm like, where do people learn this? Like, this could have saved my family thousands of dollars in financial mistakes. Like, what classes do I need to take, the nerd here who goes to school forever, to learn how to do this? And so that launched my career into financial planning. I mean, I did the unthinkable. I dropped out of my PhD and I pursued the CFP, or Certified Financial Planning coursework. And I never looked back. So that was in 2011.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? I think that's such a great story. Like, you're such an amazing example of following your passion, And I know sometimes we think of numbers people as being like very linear and very rigid and very much like, I can only do this one thing because this is the one thing that I love. but like how great that you're so well-rounded and that you've had such a varied experience. I love that so much for you.
Thank you, Graciela.
And I love how it shows up in how you work with your clients, right? Because you bring your whole self to your client experience, right? Like, tell me a little bit about the educational piece, because I know you're passionate about that as well.
Yeah, I think that when clients come to us, by the way, I work at Tobias Financial now, just so you know where I am. When they come to us, many of them come because obviously they want to take more control over their money, because money, is part of our everyday life, and we think about it as we're making transactions and thinking about our future. But as we're thinking about our clients and what's most important to them is just really finding out what their values are, right? Because we see money as a tool. What is this tool going to help you accomplish, essentially? And what do you need? What buckets do you need to set up? So just having those conversations about what's most important to them, and even extending it further and saying, if financial security was a non-issue for you, you are completely financially secure, how would you live your life differently? What would change for you? And that's when you begin to identify what's really important to them and begin to make those connections. But how do we make those connections? I mean, talking about, practical application through taxes, managing their taxes, obviously investing their portfolios so they could grow their wealth over time. And also thinking about estate planning. What happens after they build out these portfolios and they, their net worth, how is it going to be passed on to the next generation? Is it going to be in one lump sum? Is it going to be over time? Who's going to be in charge of this? And so these are the conversations that we're having with clients that sometimes they didn't think about, or sometimes they're like, look, I don't want to talk about that, but now you're making me, so I got to hold you accountable. So let's do it. So that's part of what we do.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking of money mindset, right? Like I always tell the story of my own money mindset journey, that I really felt that money was the root of all evil, right? Not just because let's just say some of the things that I was told as a child, but also my own personal experience of the adults in my life who had money versus the adults in my life who didn't have money. And it was always the people that didn't have money that were kinder and more humble. And the people that did have money were always like mean and greedy and terrible, right? And like all of these things. And so I built this story in my head about what it means to have money. And when I became an entrepreneur, like, it was really scary to be successful, even to call myself successful. Like even the word wealth to me still has a little bit of that air of like, oh shit, like, are you rich or are you wealthy? Well, oh my God, what does that mean? And what does that mean for you as a person? So it got me thinking about limiting beliefs and going on to our next question. Did you have any of that? Like, what were your limiting beliefs that you had to overcome to get to where you are today?
Sure. I think it was quite scary making the transition to a whole new career. So I think I questioned whether or not I had the capability of doing this. There were many times where I was already positioned to be a full-time professor in my previous life, right? And so changing careers and taking that leap and following that energy, right, that called me to transition that I didn't recognize before, because that was nothing I wanted to really do in my past life, meant that I had to have a lot of courage, right? So I think the belief was, oh my gosh, the limited belief was, can I really do this? But I grew up as an athlete. And so if you learn anything about being an athlete, I actually was a rower in college, is that you tolerate a lot of pain because at the end is going to pay off. So I think there are some experiences in my life that led me to think that even though this was challenging, it wasn't a limit. Maybe a limit right now, but not forever. And I think I would encourage the ladies, the goddesses that are listening, something that might seem a limit right now or a roadblock to your success doesn't mean it's going to be there forever. And things change, right, Graciela? You were saying that, you had this money script about people who had wealth and whether or not they were kind, or vice versa, right? I think that if we just think about what is the greatest gift that we could give our family is our own financial stability, right? If we could have our own financial stability, it means that we're not going to be calling on our children to take care of us when we're older to sustain us, right? Because it's going to be pretty challenging for their own financial stability as well, right? So if we could just start thinking that our financial stability is a great gift to those around us, and actually, in fact, the more stable you are, the more able you are to give to others, right? So if you're already a charitably inclined person, if you have your monthly expenses taken care of, if you know what your retirement plan looks like, if you know how to manage your taxes, if you know what your estate plan is, and if you know that if the curveballs of life will come your way with a disability or a death or a job loss, that you have the finances to weather these things, then you have more room to give to others. So I would challenge that thought process there, Graciela, and say,
oh, no, I am healed. I am healed now.
Oh, okay, good.
But
also hearing all this, I think people have this misconception that you have to have a lot of money already to work with a financial planner. Like, when's the ideal time for someone to start working with a financial planner?
As soon as possible. Don't wait another minute.
We're already late.
No, you're not late. I would say you're not late. Sometimes we have to wait to be ready to do things, but sometimes we don't have to wait until we're ready. We have to ask questions and find out, how do I become ready? Or what are some things that are working well for me, and what are things that I could improve on? And so I would encourage the goddesses out there to find out as soon as possible. It's like going to the doctor, right? Like, who the heck wants to go to get their medical wellness check every year? Nobody wants to do that, right? There's so many other things you'd rather do. But visiting a financial planner means that you kind of get a pulse on where you are right now. You get a baseline, like, okay, this is where you are with your emergency fund. This is how you are with your liability side. This is how you are with your retirement. And you need to know, because burying your head in the sand is not going to help you 5, 10, 20 years from now, when you could have started today and taken advantage of compound interest, for example, in building your portfolios.
I do think there's a lot of guilt and shame tied into money, right? And I know that I myself over the years have had a lot of different, thoughts about when would be a good time, right? I have too much debt to go see a financial advisor, or I have too little savings to go see a financial advisor, right? But I love that what you're promoting is, listen, at this point, if you haven't spoken to anyone, you really don't know what you have. Maybe what you have is perfectly fine. Maybe what you have is amazing for where you are in your life, right? Because there's different financial pictures at different ages, right? Like,
Sure.
So I love that. Just a nice, healthy checkup is a great idea.
Your financial wellness checkup. You deserve one.
Check up my cat.
There you go.
There you go. So a lot of what we do here is based on books that we've read and stories that we've heard, because I do think that storytelling is a big part of how we just grow and evolve as a culture. So what book would you like to add to our Goddess Library?
Oh, a fantastic book. So this is a book that I picked up a long time ago, and then I was reminded by somebody very special to pick up again. It's called The Second Mountain, The Quest for a Moral Life by David Brooks. Basically, the book talks about how in our first mountain, it's all about climbing, let's say, the corporate ladder, or climbing towards that goal that you had for yourself. All of what the world rewards, right? Those accolades. And sometimes you get to the top of that mountain and you're like, is this really what I wanted? And there's a point of reflection. And you're like, okay, there's something that might be missing, because you may have accomplished all these things, but they're not as fulfilling as you thought that they were. And so it's during that time of reflection that you begin to think about how you want to dedicate and commit your life going forward. Like, to what causes do you want to commit to? And so that second mountain really talks about how we could begin to rebuild the fabric of our society, either through social capital, giving back to others, being involved with a charity, being committed to your family, whatever that is that maybe the first mountain had distracted you from. Now it's time to shift to that mountain, because that's where true meaning is, right? So if you have been working on things that are very individualistic, it's more about that interdependence with others around you within that community to bring you true joy, right? Because I'm sure when you have your guests in your podcasts, there's some that just radiate joy, and you're like, where do they get all this joy from? I want some of that, right? And so that's what this book is about. It's about finding that thing that you are passionate about, that calls at your soul, that is beyond some of the material things, but where you are giving back and gives joy. And it continues as your legacy beyond you.
So you've already had many incarnations in this life, different things that you've done. So bringing that book, it kind of goes into our next question of what else is percolating inside of you? What's that next project that's waiting to come out? And is there anything that's holding it back from coming out right now?
Yeah, so Julieta, I feel that it's interesting how wherever age I'm at is sort of what I'm focusing on. So in the early stages of my life, I focused on working with children because I did work as an elementary school teacher as well. I worked with teenagers, and then I worked at a university, and I worked with a lot of college students, and now I'm in, financial planning, and the group starts getting a little bit more matching my age as I move into this new life. Something that's really bubbling up for me is working with women in transition. I think that we're always in transition, but working with women in transition, I have been listening more and more to what it is that they want and what they might be missing, and how these conversations are coming up during my meetings with clients. And so I feel that my role is changing in, obviously it's financial planning, but it's also life planning and helping them find the steps and the roadmap towards that, towards what they want to have. And so that's coming up for me. The other thing that's coming up for me, going back to the book that I told you about, is love, right? And how important that is. Sometimes we forget that, that has maybe, and we cannot quantify the impact of showing love for others, showing a little bit more mercy, more grace towards others. And also in these conversations, right? You said, Graciela, sometimes there's some shame around money, and just showing that kindness towards someone and say, hey, I made financial mistakes. Just because I'm in this industry doesn't mean I've never made a financial mistake. Of course I have. I studied so I could make less financial mistakes. So just being part of that transition for women, and actually some men also have been talking to me more about what's important to them besides that first mountain. Now what? So I think that's what's bubbling up for me, Julieta, is that transition and how I could be part of helping someone through that process.
You're speaking my language with the L word, love, love, love. And it's so hard because we so often equate love in the English language as romantic love. And there's so much more to the word love. And like, even as we're sitting here talking, I'm like, financial has been like the thing that I've struggled with the most in life. I'm here as a healer, as a guide for people. And, I'm supposed to be Mother Teresa and, do this all from this space, and, have graduated into thinking, no, that's not how it's meant to be. And the more abundance that I have, the more that I can do to support people in their healing and growth. But as you're speaking, I was sitting there going, I've forgotten to connect love to abundance, love of money, and seeing where that can go. So I also feel like historically money has been, the power of money has been delegated to men, and it's time for women to step up and use money in a feminine way and connect to the power of money in a feminine way, because in this toxic masculine use of money that we have out there, it's not creating the best life for all of us. So as women, we need to love money and use money in a loving way.
Yeah, and money's a tool, right? Just like you have in your practice, Julieta, right? You have many tools to do what you need to do, right? But it's what happens is the energy that's that's transmitted through that money, right? We're using that money for love, for caring for others, for paying for tuition, for paying for the doctor, for buying transportation, for buying the home that you love, for buying the things that bring you joy, right? So it's just looking at it as a tool, and how do we take good care of it, be good stewards of it, so that it could produce more for us in the future. But I agree with you, Julieta. I think as a financial advisor, as a female, I do bring something different to the table as well. There's kind of like that intuition during a meeting of things that may or may not be, resonating well with the client, or there might be a little bit more digging that we need to do, or a little bit more advocacy as well, because I may have a client that just doesn't know what questions to ask. And it's just empowering them with the right questions to ask. And sometimes I say, well, you might be thinking this, and they may not be thinking this, but I'm anticipating some questions that they should be asking that they just don't know to ask yet. Or even when they go to their professionals, okay, here are some questions to ask before you go see your professional. Or if you're thinking about your estate plan, these are things to think about your estate plan, questions that you may have never asked your partner about. That now it's like, oh, now that I have these questions, I have to ask you. It's my assignment. But now you've been empowered. So I think that would be the differentiator, as you were mentioning, that as a female, it's less the transactional piece, but the transformational experience that we could have during this ongoing relationship in financial planning. It's quite magical. It really is. To me, it's incredible. I mean, it's exciting when the client's like, oh my gosh, Kat, I get it. This is fun. I'm like, I'm going to teach you. Yes, it is fun. This could be a lot of fun.
I don't know that I've reached that level of excitement yet, but I love that you're a dreamer.
Goals.
I'm a dreamer.
Well, and I'm kind of curious, and this is off script, so don't panic, but you're talking about the second mountain, and I'm wondering if it could be the first mountain, right? Like, as we're evolving as a culture, as a community, as women, right? Taking sitting in our divine feminine, right? Part of that is nurturing, and part of that is raising the next generation. My son is this close to getting his first job. He's 14. And I told him he was not allowed to take a job until he took a financial planning course, like a financial literacy course,
I
so
love that.
He learns the numbers, right? But I'm curious if you have any thoughts or advice specifically for children so that they don't have to go through that first phase, right? Like, how do we break this cycle, What are your thoughts on that?
Well, besides throwing them into the fire, like you and I writing checks out for our parents.
Kind of way.
Definitely, teaching them, for example, this is a great way for him to be able to quantify what it costs to purchase something. So I would say if there's something he wants to buy, just say, okay, how many hours will it take for you to work in order to buy this one thing? And is it worth it to work that many hours to buy this one thing, right? And so if you break it down like that, I think it becomes more real and like, oh no, forget it. I don't need that so much. Now they begin to make decisions, informed decisions, because we do them all the time. We make these decisions all the time, whether we're going to buy a house, whether we're going to go on a trip, right? We're making these decisions, but we don't take the step back and say, okay, what do I need to do in order to be able to get to this, buy this thing or go where I want to go? How many weeks, how many months do I need to work? I mean, we do it for retirement too, right? And it's not too soon to start saving for one day. We call it retirement, but it could be your financial freedom day, right? Because it could be like, hey, I need to save X number of dollars to maintain my basic living expenses. But once I've reached that, then maybe I'm changing to another career where I could just pay enough to pay my living expenses and my portfolio continues to grow, and then it's going to take care of me in the future. So a Roth IRA is an individual retirement account that he could definitely start with, Graciela. I would say that would be an awesome investment for him. And I've seen parents in the past match their kids. So they'll say, okay, the IRS limit for 2023 is $6,500 if you're under the age of 50. He's probably not going to put in $6,500, but let's say he's going to put in, I don't know, $500. And you could say, okay, I'll match you $500 if you say $500. Now they get the concept of employer, although you're the parent, employer matching, because in the future, if they work at a company, an employer may offer a 401k, which is a retirement plan, with a match. And now they learn this concept early on.
You know, I love that you said, you really just blew my mind, your financial freedom day. I think that might be the best quote of this entire podcast today. Like, truly, because, you know, we're a family of ADHDers and we're all very grounded in the present. And, you know, I know that my kids, just like my mom, just like me, and I know that it's part of my immigrant story too, of like, you know what, I work really hard, I deserve this, you know, and I might buy something or go on a trip or do something because I deserve it, because forget the numbers. I don't even care. You know, there's a meme now that's like a little girl and she goes, Mom, we're going to go to Target and we're not going to worry about the money. We're just not going to think about it. We're not going to think about it. We're just going to have fun. And I get that. But when you said financial freedom day, like that's amazing. Because when you say retirement, it calls a future that those of us who are grounded in the present cannot imagine, right? Like, well, I can because I'm old, but like my kids cannot envision themselves as an older person. Like they cannot think that one day they will want to stop working. Even me at 49, I really don't think of a day that I'm going to stop working. Like what else would I do? I don't know. That sounds crazy. So but when you say financial freedom, man, now you got my attention. This I like this, because there's no age on that, right? So what if your financial freedom day is at 30, 35, 40, 45, right? Like, why does it have to be 72 or whatever the date? You know, I think to me, that's one of the biggest problems is that the concept is work super hard, right? This is the American way, right? Work super hard. And then when you're like super old and your knees hurt, retire. And then you can relax. Like, my God, that's horrible.
Right. And that's where the concept, not just the financial freedom day, but also like simple things like you said, the purchasing of things, right? Like, so one thing that we do in our neighborhood, we crack up because there's so many tools in everybody's garages, right? And so I tell my husband, he'll say, Kat, I want to buy this. I'm like, are you sure somebody else doesn't have that in their garage before you go out and buy it? You know, because that also gives you a little bit of freedom, right? So if it's a tool that costs $150 and he borrows it for the day and, you know, we buy the person lunch or whatever, and we do it anyway without even doing anything for each other. But it's like, okay, well, now you just freed up $150 that could be geared towards something else, towards your financial freedom day. So just thinking about everyday opportunities that if you were going to put X number of dollars in purchasing something, but if you could, you know, have that group of community that you could be, you know, interdependent on some things such as that, how can you reallocate those dollars to build your safety and security in financial freedom day?
And I think that goes back to the point that you and Julietta were making about love, because at the end of the day, if we lived in true community, we would only have one set of tools for every 10 houses, because you don't use your hammer every single day, right? So why would we be wasting money on duplicating all of these things when they're literally, you know, 40 feet away from each other, right? My garage and your garage are 40 feet away from each other, but I can't touch yours and you can't touch mine, right? Like, but if we had more love, if we lived more in that feminine power, right, then we would be sharing. And oh my gosh, could you imagine all the freedom? That's gorgeous. I love you.
I love you too. So let's start doing inventories of the garages now.
I love it.
I'm like, I see beautiful communities evolving in our future. So, but we're getting close to wrap up time. And one of the questions we love to ask our guests, Kat, is what is one little juicy gift nugget you would like to leave for our audience today?
So in the sense of community and continuing that theme, I think it's really important to have your girlfriends, your goddesses around you. That's so important. I think we underestimate the power of having that community around us, you know, whether it be to talk about, hey, should I go see a financial advisor? Or, hey, do you have this that I could borrow, this table I could borrow for the next party? And of course you're invited to the party, kind of thing. Or even for the most challenging times of your life. You know, I've shared this with Graciela, my husband's health. He actually had a really bad scare, a health scare. And boy, was it great to have community at that point, because he actually was admitted to the hospital in another state. And so I couldn't be there. But his boss, who I have a friendship with, called me, texted me, make sure I was okay. They offered to fly me over there if needed. And my friends in my community, in my neighborhood, were asking about him. So even just having someone there, during the highs and the lows of your life is extremely important, which is why I love what you're doing, because you're building this community of women that if we go through your YouTube channel or your podcast, we begin to see, hey, who could I reach out to if I have a question about XYZ? But, keep your goddesses around you, because they're a true gift that cannot be quantified, but they could be part of your financial freedom as well.
I love that. That's
freedom
beautiful.
in every way. Freedom in every way. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself and telling us your story. I'm so, so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Julieta. Thank you, Graciela, so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And to our audience, have a magical day.
Thanks for joining us today and keeping us in the top 10% of podcasts in the world.
Ask us how you can promote your business on this podcast as a sponsor, and make sure you check out the show notes for details on how to get in touch with Julieta, Graciela, or today's special guest.
We're sending you lots of love and gratitude. Have a magical day.